but then the wife is going to be the caregiver, or again, there's that's stereotyping to some extent, but that caregiver is the one that's going to, you got to think about them.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't, then that's where they're going to go to an early grave, really.
Yeah, I mean, you'd see a husband and wife, and they might come in, and the husband will be like, well, let's put everything on her, do everything we need for her.
Right.
Right. That way she's set up.
Right.
Well, if we don't put it on you, she's not set up, because there's a good chance you're going to need it first.
Right.
And, the statistics are 7 out of every 10 people over the age of 65 are going to need some sort of long-term care. Right. And we're seeing that percentage is going up. It's probably closer to 75 now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
and we're just now on the cusp of starting to see this, because I'm in my 40s, late 40s, but 40s, and I haven't seen, I look at some of the relatives that I had, and they didn't struggle from it, but now the other relatives that are living
longer,
they're making that to their 80s, and because the more and more we see people eating healthier, living healthier lives, and more we're learning about how to stay healthy, the more we're going to live longer, but then we're also going to start to slip a little bit mentally and cognitive, our cognitive, but also our motor, fine motor, and the rest of it. It's going to start going downhill. So we've got to have a plan. And like you said, you say, well, 7 out of 10, or 7.5 out of 10. I don't think so, but it's there, it's true, and it's only going to get worse.
Right. So. And that's the whole thing. People look at you and they say 7 out of 10. Well, you interview that same 100 people, and 70% of them are going to say, yeah, 7 out of 10, but I'm not going to be one of those.
That's right. Yep.
Hey, I'm not one of those
right.
3.
That's right.
That's those 3 over there.
Yeah.
But you can't plan for a heart attack. You can't plan for a stroke.
Yep.
You can't plan for Alzheimer's.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, those.
Yeah, and my wife's a physical therapist, and that's another, you bring up a good point there, because she sees so many people that, unexpectedly strokes and all that. I mean, that can change you over just a split second. You go from, hey, I'm not going to need this, to all of a sudden now your whole right side is paralyzed. You can't take care of yourself like you used to. Through PT, they do a lot of them can recover, but then you've got those that can't, and then now they're going to need some sort of in-home care. They're going to need some sort of, eventually maybe staying in some sort of facility. It's just the things that we don't know about, we have to plan for. And if you can do it without, what's nice about the asset-based long-term care which is what I deal with, is you're reallocating money from IRAs, you're reallocating things that you already have, and you're just repositioning them and leveraging that money to create more for long-term care. And then if you don't use it for long-term care, it's not like the old where it's gone.
Right.
You've actually still grown it a little bit, and then if you never need it, you pass that piece on to your relatives or to your heirs.
Yeah, it's about taking that money that you already have and making it work for you.
Exactly.
Exactly. I've heard a lot of it like getting $1 to do the work of 4.
Right. Yep. That's right. Yeah.
That's a great. That's a great return.
Heck yeah. I can handle that.
Yeah. I mean, just letting your money do the work for you initially, and just because it's there, it's not something that can't be adjusted either, right? You can move it around if there's something that you start with one thing in your 50s, and you decide that you want to use that money for something else. You can use some.
Yeah,
you can have some near future, closer future, and then the long term all being in there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of flexibility, and again, in order to each person comes from a different age, from a different perspective, and from different goals, and so the flexibility, we can build that in so that somebody who's maybe younger and they don't know exactly where they're going to be in 15 years. And none of us really do, but as you're young, you've got that flexibility to maneuver it, to get access to some of that before you need it for long-term care. You've got it. It really is kind of a new way of looking at Alzheimer's and assisted living and the need for that, and the solutions are so much better and different than we've ever seen in the past.
This is Planning for the Future with our guest, Michael Greer. To get a free copy of Michael's book, call 804-427-7784.
A little bit of information goes a long way. That's why you wrote the book too, right? Tax-free money for long-term care.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I think I bring to the table is, again, I have the analyst side of my brain, but also that communication and educating people, and again, it starts with that first consultation or financial review where we really sit down and we look at everything. But as I make recommendations, educating everybody on what the need is and how this can impact. And I think that's key. Any investment that you look at, you should be educated on it. You shouldn't just blindly trust and blindly do what somebody says just because, well, they've been my advisor for 15 years. They may not be up on everything in different realms of what they're familiar with. So education is key. And again, that's in the book. I mean, I think it's a good starting point. You're going to get a good grounded basis for the education, but then taking it to that next level where we're formulating something for you specifically. We start, again, we go through, it's a very systematic, we have a process that we walk through. And by the time we get to the end, we know what your needs are and what your ideal goals are, and then we come up with a solution that's going to fit you specifically, and not just kind of a cookie cutter. Everybody, you walk in, oh, you need long-term care? Yeah, here it is. Sign
fill this out.
Yeah, fill this out, and that's all you need. So that's what I think one of the biggest things I bring is, again, that education side of it and being able to communicate what it in layman's terms. I like to draw lots of pictures, and I like to really, identify for you what you're looking for and help you to understand what it is that you need and how to get it.
Right. And, again, we've talked about this, that it's changed, and B, it's not scary. It's
right.
It's, just that initial talk to be like, oh, you mean I can do this with my money,
right.
as opposed to it sitting here and doing that. So there are so many advantages, and like you talk about the tax-free advantage. Yep. Veterans, there's lots of great programs for veterans out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the biggest point is to just get started. That's
right.
the hardest part is to get started. And do you think it's ever too early to get started with it?
Maybe infants.
To get a free copy of Michael's book, call 804-427-7784.
It's probably never too early to start the planning.
Yeah.
Once you've got a job, you're out of, you're in the workforce, and you're really starting to develop your life. Because I think it may not be the time to put long-term care into your portfolio in your 20s or 30s maybe, but is it time to plan and know when to think about it? Yes, it's always a good time to start that plan. And again, long-term care, asset-based long-term care, it's just a piece of the puzzle. You've got so many other things. You need income, you need tax savings, you need all this. So like with the long-term care, say you've had an annuity that you've used for years, or you've had for years and years, you don't even know what it's for. That can be converted over and used to provide long-term care. The IRAs, you've built your IRAs up. Those can be move the money to end up, where an IRA is not tax-free, but you can turn that into tax-free long-term care funding, which, so all those things. But yeah, to answer your question, not in a 300 word essay. Yes, I don't think there's ever a time, or I guess no is the answer. It's never a time that's too early to start.
Well, and like you say, you're taking all these things early on. Say you're joining the workforce, and you start, and building your future financial health. And you're seeing a lot of even millennials and the Gen Z now too.
Yep.
They're very big into, the finances and stuff like that. They're interested in the stock market and how things run. So those things that they're building now with the asset-based long-term care is going to help them in the future as well, because, and I'm sure it's only going to get better as far as, the programs and the availability of things like that, and taking those assets and being able to turn them into long-term care where, it might be something a little bit riskier when you're younger because you can afford to take that little risk, and then you want something a little bit more rock solid. And like we said, with the COVID, people's investments were pretty safe during this time. They didn't have to worry too much about it. I know that 401ks, a lot of 401ks that took those big hits, it's going to take 5 to 7 years for some of those 401ks to recover. That took a big chunk out of that.
And we don't even know now. We had a nice bounce, but we've had it go back down. And, the W or the V or whichever it is, they talk about the recovery being a W or versus a V versus, the thing about it is, especially as you get closer to retirement, being able to reallocate those assets for whether it's for income or whether it's for asset-based long-term care, taking them off the table before it's too late, because somebody, say in January, they were going to retire, and so they retired and didn't do anything with their money from a planning standpoint, left it in the market, and they thought, oh, well, I've got, $1 million in this account. Well, they woke up, end of March or May, and, they had $700,000 in their account, which, because we had about a 30% decrease in a lot of assets. And so then what do? Do you let it sit? Do you go back to work? Do you, is that going to cover what you need? So that's part of the planning, is you've got to take into account when you're retiring, when you might need the long-term care, when, all those pieces come into that financial review. Because we can, I can think of things, think of it this way, like when I went to get a will when my kids were born, they asked so many questions I had no clue to even think about. And it's like, oh, that was a really good question. And so we put things into place. You got who's going to take the kids if something happens. Do you have any special needs for the kids? All that stuff. Same thing with the financial review. You got to really sit down and go through the questions that maybe these online surveys are very generic, or things that you just never thought about. And so by doing it, getting it out of this abstract, putting it into the concrete, and then every year at a minimum reviewing that and seeing the changes and getting you to where you need to at no matter what age you are.
What is Richmond like as far as retirement?
As far when you say retirement,
some places are a little bit more, very retiree friendly.
I would say Richmond's a pretty. We've got a lot of people that are lifers. They're been there. Their families have been there. They've been there forever. So you got a mix, though, because a lot of people from D.C., New Jersey, New York will come and retire. It's far enough south, but it's still East Coast. It's still Northeast, sort of. So they'll come and retire in Richmond. So, we definitely have a broad range of either folks that have stayed here forever and their families have died here and they all live here, versus, we've got a nice mix of people that come from the Northeast. So it's a pretty diverse area. We do have those that are snowbirds too, so they'll go down, which again, Richmond is not that cold, but we still, we've got our fair share of those that'll go down to Florida or wherever and buy a condo or stay in a condo 3-4 months. And then really from January to March is really our only cold time. We've got a pretty diverse retiree groups and long-term care facilities. We've got ranging. If you want to think about, okay, if I'm going to retire here, do I have a facility that can take care of me? Yes. Is it going to be cheap? No. Anywhere from $6,000, $12,000 a month. Is what So you think, well, I've got my pension, I've got my Social Security, that's going to cover a piece of it. But then, how are we going to take care of the rest of that if we need it?
Right, and there's more that goes to it too. What if you need surgeries during that time?
Exactly.
That's basically just your rent.
Right. That's right. That's right. Yep.
That's just your living expenses. That's not covering all the other things